Namaste. John chapter 19. Let me change the headline. Pilate then took Yah-Usha and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted thorn branches into a crown and placed it on his head, put a purple robe on him, and went up to him, saying over and over, "Hail, King of the Jews," and hitting him in the face. Pilate went outside once more and said to the crowd, "Look, I'm bringing him out to you to get you to understand that I find no case against him." So Yahusha came out wearing the thorn branch crown and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Look at the man." When the head Kohanim and the temple guard saw him, they shouted, "Put him to death on the stake! Put him to death on the stake!" Pilate said to them, "You take him out yourselves and put him to death on the stake, because I don't find any case against him." The Judeans answered him, "We have a law. According to that law, he ought to be put to death, because he made himself out to be the Son of God." On hearing this, Pilate became even more frightened. He went back into the headquarters and asked Yahusha, "Where are you from?" But Yahusha didn't answer. So Pilate said to him, "You refuse to speak to me? Don't you understand that it is in my power either to set you free or to have you executed on the stake?" Yahusha answered, "You would have no power over me if it hadn't been given to you from above. This is why the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." On hearing this, Pilate tried to find a way to set him free. But the Judeans shouted, "If you set this man free, it means you are not a friend of the emperor. Everyone who claims to be a king is opposing the emperor." When Pilate heard what they were saying, he brought Yahusha outside and sat down on the judge's seat in the place called the Pavement, in Aramaic, Gabbatha. It was about noon on preparation day for Pesach. He said to the Judeans, "Here's your king." They shouted, take him away, put him to death on the stake." Pilate said to them, "You want me to execute your king on a stake?" The head Kohanim answered, "We have no king but the emperor." Then Pilate handed Yahusha over to them to have him put to death on the stake. So they took charge of Yahusha. Carrying the stake himself, he went out to the place called Skull, in Aramaic, Golgotha. There they nailed him to the stake along with two others, one on each side, with Yahusha in the middle. Pilate also had a notice written and posted on the stake. It read, "Yahusha from Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Judeans read this notice, because the place where Yahusha was put on the stake was close to the city, and it had been written in Hebrew, in Latin, and in Greek. The Judeans had Kohanim therefore said to Pilate, "Don't write the King of the Jews," but he said, "I'm King of the Jews." Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." When the soldiers had nailed Yahusha to the stake, they took his clothes and divided them into 4 shares, a share for each soldier, with the underrobe left over. Now the underrobe was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. So they said to one another, "We shouldn't tear it in pieces. Let's draw for it." This happened in order to fulfill the words from the Tanakh. They divided my clothes among themselves and gambled for my robe. This is why the soldiers did these things. Nearby Yahusha's execution stake stood his mother's sister Miriam, the wife of Cleophas and Miriam from Magdala. When Yahusha saw his mother and the Talmud whom he loved standing there, he said to his mother, "Mother, this is your son." Then he said to the Talmud, "This is your mother." And from that time on, the Talmud took her into his own home. After this, knowing that all things had accomplished their purpose, Yahusha, in order to fulfill the words of the Tanakh, said, "I'm thirsty." A jar full of cheap sour wine was there, so they soaked a sponge in the wine, coated it with oregano leaves, and held it up to his mouth. After Yahusha had taken the wine, he said, "It is accomplished." And letting his head droop, he delivered up his spirit. It was preparation day, and the Judeans did not want the bodies to remain on the stake on Shabbat, since it was an especially important Shabbat. So they asked Pilate to have the legs broken and the bodies removed. The soldiers came and broke the legs of the first men who had been put on a stake beside Yahusha, then the legs of the other one. But when they got to Yahusha and saw that he was already dead, they didn't break his legs. However, one of the soldiers stabbed his side with a spear, and at once blood and water flowed out. The man who saw it has testified about it, and his testimony is true. And he knows that he tells the truth, so you too can trust. For these things happen in order to fulfill this passage of the Tanakh. Not one of his bones will be broken. And again another passage says, "They will look at him whom they have pierced." Whom they have pierced. After this, Joseph of Ramatayim, who was a Talmud of Yahusha, but a secret one out of fear of the Judeans, asked Pilate if he could have Yahusha's body. Pilate gave his consent, so Joseph came and took the body away. Also, Nicodemus, who at first had gone to see Yahusha by night, came with some 70 pounds of spices, a mixture of myrrh and aloes. They took Yahusha's body and wrapped it up in linen sheets with the spices, in keeping with Judean burial practice. In the vicinity of where he had been executed was a garden, and in the garden was a new tomb in which no one had ever been buried. So because it was preparation day for the Judeans, and because the tomb was close by, that is where they buried Yahusha. Chapter 20. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Miriam from Magdala went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she came running to Shimon Kepha and the other Talmud, the one Yahusha loved, and said to them, "They've taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they've put him. Then Kepha and the other Talmud started for the tomb. They both ran, but the other Talmud outran Kepha and reached the tomb first. Stooping down, he saw the linen burial sheets lying there, but did not go in. Then, following him, Shimon Kepha arrived, entered the tomb, and saw the burial sheets lying there, also the cloth that had been around his head, lying not with the sheets, but in a separate place and still folded up. Then the other Talmud, who had arrived at the tomb first, also went in. He saw and he trusted. They had not yet come to understand that the Tanakh teaches that the Messiah has to rise from the dead. So the Talmudim returned home, but Miriam stood outside crying. As she cried, she bent down, peered into the tomb, and saw 2 angels in white sitting where the body of Yahusha had been, one at the head and one at the feet. "Why are you crying?" they asked her. Mm. They took my Lord, she said to them, and I don't know where they have put him. As she said this, she turned around and saw Yah-Usha standing there, but she didn't know it was he. She didn't know it was he. Yah-Usha said to her, Lady, why are you crying? Whom are you looking for? Thinking he was the gardener, she said to him, Sir, if you're the one who carried him away, just tell me where you put him, and I'll go and get him myself. Yah-Usha said to her, Miriam. Turning, she cried out to him in Hebrew, Rabbani, that is, teacher. Stop holding on to me, Yah-Usha said to her, because I haven't yet gone back to the Father. But go to my brothers and tell them that I am going back to my father and your father, to my God and your God. Miriam of Magdala went to the Talmidim with the news that she had seen the Lord and that he had told her this. In the evening that same day, the first day of the week, when the Talmidim were gathered together behind locked doors out of fear of the Judeans, Yah-Usha came, stood in the middle and said, Shalom Aleichem. Having greeted them, he showed them his hands and his side. The Talmidim were overjoyed to see the Lord. Shalom Aleichem. Yah-Usha repeated, Just as the Father sent me, I myself am also sending you. Having said this, he breathed on them and said to them, Receive the Ruach HaKodesh. If you forgive someone's sins, their sins are forgiven. If you hold them, they are held. Now Toma, the name means twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Yah-Usha came. When the other Talmidim told him, We have seen the Lord, he replied, Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, put my finger into the place where the nails were, and put my hands into his side, I refuse to believe it. A week later, his Talmidim were once more in the room, and this time Toma was with them. Although the doors were locked, Yah-Usha came, stood among them, and said, Shalom Aleichem. Then he said to Toma, Put your finger here, look at my hands. Take your hand and put it into my side. Don't be lacking in trust, but have trust. Toma answered him, My Lord and my God. Yah-Usha said to him, Have you trusted because you have seen me? How blessed are those who do not see but trust anyway. In the presence of the Talmidim, Yah-Usha performed many other miracles which have not been recorded in this book. But these which have been recorded are here, so that you may trust that Yah-Usha is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by this trust you may have life because of who he is. Chapter 21. After this, Yah-Usha appeared again to the Talmidim at Lake Tiberias. Here is how it happened. Shimon, Kepha, and Toma, his name means twin, were together with Nathanael from Cana in the Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other Talmidim. Shimon, Kepha said, I'm going fishing. They said to him, We're coming with you. They went and got into the boat, but that night didn't catch anything. However, just as day was breaking, Yah-Usha stood on shore, but the Talmidim didn't know it was he. He said to them, You don't have any fish, do you? No, they answered him. He said to them, Throw in your net to starboard, and you will catch some. So they threw in their net, and there were so many fish in it that they couldn't haul it aboard. The Talmid Yah-Usha loved said to Kepha, It's the Lord. On hearing it was the Lord, Shimon Kepha threw on his coat, because he was stripped for work, and plunged into the lake. But the other Talmidim followed in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they weren't far from shore, only about 100 yards. When they stepped ashore, they saw a fire of burning coals with a fish on it and some bread. Yah-Usha said to them, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught." Shimei and Kepha went up and dragged the net ashore. It was full of fish, 133 of them. But even with so many, the net wasn't torn. Yah-Usha said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the Talmidim dared to ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Yah-Usha came, took the bread, and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time Yah-Usha had appeared to the Talmidim after being raised from the dead. After breakfast, Yah-Usha said to Shimon Kepha, "Shimon bar Yochanan, do you love me more than these?" He replied, "Yes, Lord, you know I'm your friend." He said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Shimon bar Yochanan, do you love me?" He replied, "Yes, Lord, you know I'm your friend." He said to him, "Shepherd my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Shimon bar Yochanan, are you my friend?" Shimon was hurt that he questioned him a third time, "Are you my friend?" So he replied, "Lord, you know everything. You know I'm your friend." Yah-Usha said to him, "Feed my sheep." Yes, indeed. I tell you, when you were younger, you put on your clothes and went where you wanted. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. He said this to indicate the kind of death by which Kepha would bring glory to God. Then Yah-Usha said to him, "Follow me." Kepha turned and saw the Talmid Yah-Usha especially loved following behind, the one who had leaned against him at the supper and had asked, "Who is the one who is betraying you?" On seeing him, Kepha said to Yah-Usha, "Lord, what about him?" Yah-Usha said to him, "If I want him to stay on until I come, what is it to you? You follow me." Therefore the word spread among the brothers that Talmid would not die. However, Yah-Usha didn't say he wouldn't die, but simply, "If I want him to stay on until I come, what is it to you?" This one is the Talmid who is testifying about these things and who has recorded them. And we know that his testimony is true. But there are also many other things Yah-Usha did, and if they were all to be recorded, I don't think the whole world could contain the books that would have to be written. Okay. Genesis chapter 12. Parasha 3. Lech Lecha. Get yourself out. Now Yahweh said to Abram, "Get yourself out of your country, away from your kinsmen, and away from your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you, and I will make your name great. and you are to be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, but I will curse anyone who curses you, and by you all the families of the earth will be blessed. So Abram went, as Yahweh had said to him, and Lot went in with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai, his brother's son Lot, and all their possessions which they had accumulated, as well as the people they had acquired in Haran. Then they set out for the land of Canaan, and entered the land of Canaan. Abram passed through the land to the place called Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. The Canaani were then in the land. Yahweh appeared to Abram and said, "To your descendants I will give this land." So he built an altar there to Yahweh who had appeared to him. He left that place, went to the hill east of Beit El, and pitched his tent. With Beit El to the west and Ai to the east, he built an altar there and called on the name of Yahweh. Then Abram traveled on, continuing toward the Negev. But there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down into Egypt to stay there, because the famine in the land was severe. When he came close to Egypt and was about to enter, he said to Sarai, his wife, "Hear now, I know that you are a good-looking woman, so that when the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife,' and kill me but keep you alive. Please say that you are my sister, so that it will go well with me for your sake, and so that I will stay alive because of you." When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians did notice that the woman was very beautiful. Pharaoh's princess saw her and commanded her to Pharaoh, so the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. He treated Abram well for her sake, giving him sheep, cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female slaves and camels. But Yahweh inflicted great plagues on Pharaoh and his household because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this that you have done to me? Why didn't you tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say, 'She is my sister,' so that I took her to be my own wife? Now, therefore, here is your wife. Take her and go away." So Pharaoh gave orders concerning him to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had. Chapter 13. Abram went up from Egypt, he, his wife, and everything he had, and Lot with him, into the Negev. Abram became wealthy, with much cattle, silver, and gold. As he went on his travels from the Negev, he came to Beit El, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Beit El and Ai, where he had first built the altar. And there Abram called on the name of Yahweh. Lot, who was traveling with Abram, also had flocks, herds, and tents. But the land could not support their living together, because their possessions were too great for them to remain together. Moreover, quarreling arose between Abram's and Lot's herdsmen. The Canaani and the Perizi were then living in the land. Abram said to Lot, "Please, let's not have quarreling between me and you, or between my herdsmen and yours, since we are kinsmen. Isn't the whole land there in front of you? Please separate yourself from me. If you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left." Lot looked up and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan was well watered everywhere, before Yahweh destroyed Sodom and Amorah, like the garden of Yahweh. like the land of Egypt, in the direction of Zoar. So Lot chose all the plain of the Yarden for himself, and Lot traveled eastward. Thus they separated themselves from each other. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, and Lot lived in the cities of the plain, setting up his tent near Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were evil, committing great sins against Yahweh. Yahweh said to Abram, after Lot had moved away from him, look all around you from where you are, to the north, the south, the east, and the west. All the land you see I will give to you and your descendants forever. And I will make your descendants as numerous as the specks of dust on the earth, so that if a person can count the specks of dust on the earth, then your descendants can be counted. Get up and walk through the length and breadth of the land, because I will give it to you. Abram moved his tent and came to live by the oaks of Mamre, which are in Hebron. There he built an altar to Yahweh. Chapter 14. When Amraphel was king of Shinar, Arioch king of Elasar, Kedorlaomer king of Elam, and Tidal king of Goyim, they made war together against Bera king of Sodom, and against Bilsha king of Amorah, Shinab king of Admah, Shemever king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is the same of Zoar. All the latter kings joined forces in the Siddim valley, where the Dead Sea is. They had served Gedorlaomer 12 years, but in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Gedorlaomer and the kings with him came and defeated the Rephaim in Ashiterot Karnaim, the Zuzim in Ham, the Aimim in Shaveh Kiriatayim, and the Hori at Seir, their mountain, all the way to El Paran by the desert. Next they turned back, came to Ain Mishpat, which is the same as Kadesh, and defeated all the country of the Amalekite, and also the Amori, who lived in Hatzatzon Tamar. Then the kings of Sodom, Amorah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela, that is Zoar, came out and arrayed themselves for battle in the Siddim valley against Gedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of Goyim, Amraphel, king of Admah, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings against the 5. Now the Siddim valley was full of clay pits, and when the kings of Sodom and Amorah fled, some fell into them, while the rest fled to the hills. The victors took all the possessions of Sodom and Amorah, and all their food supply. Then they left. But as they left, they took Lot, Avram's brother's son, and his possessions, since he was living in Sodom. Someone who had escaped came and told Avram the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Emori, brother of Eshcol and brother of Anel, all of them allies of Avram. When Avram heard that his nephew had been taken captive, he led out his trained men who had been born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. During the night he and his servants divided his forces against them, then attacked and pursued them all the way to Hova, north of Dammesek. He recovered all the goods and brought back his nephew Lot with his goods, together with the women and the other people. After his return from slaughtering Gedorlaomer and the kings with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him in the Shaveh valley, also known as the King's Valley. Melchizedek, king of Shalem, brought out bread and wine. He was Kohen of El Elyon, God Most High. So he blessed him with these words: Blessed be Avram by El Elyon, maker of heaven of earth, and blessed be El Elyon, who handed your enemies over to you. Avram gave him a tenth of everything. The king of Sodom said to Avram, give me the people and keep the goods for yourself. But Avram answered the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand in an oath to Yahweh El Elyon, maker of heaven and earth, that I will not take so much as a thread or a sandal thong of anything that is yours, so that you won't be able to say, I made Abram rich. I will take only what my troops have eaten, and the share of the spoil belonging to the men who came with me, Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre. Let them have their share. I'm gonna do maybe one or two more chapters. Chapter 15. Sometime later, the word of Yahweh came to Abram in a vision. Don't be afraid, Abram. I am your protector. Your reward will be very great. Abram replied, Yahweh, God, what good will your gifts be to me if I continue childless? And Eliezer from Damomesek inherits my possessions. You haven't given me a child. Avram continued, so someone born in my house will be my heir. But the word of Adonai, I said Adonai. But the word of Yahweh came to him. This man will not be your heir, nor your heir will be a child from your own body. Then he brought him outside and said, look up at the sky and count the stars. If you can count them, your descendants will be that many. He believed in Yahweh, and he credited to him as righteousness. Then he said to him, I am Yahweh, who brought you out from Ur-Kasdim to give you this land as your possession. He replied, Yahweh, God, how am I to know that I will possess it? He answered him, bring me a 3-year-old cow, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a dove, and a young pigeon. He brought him all these, cut the animals in two, and placed the pieces opposite each other, but he didn't cut the birds in half. Birds of prey swooped down on the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. But Abram drove them away. As the sun was about to set, a deep sleep fell on Abram. Horror and great darkness came over him. Yahweh said to Abram, know this for certain. Your descendants will be foreigners in a land that is not theirs. They will be slaves and held in oppression there 400 years. But I will also judge that nation, the one that makes them slaves. Afterwards, they will leave with many possessions. As for you, you will join your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. Only in the 4th generation will your descendants come back here, because only then will the Ameyn be ripe for punishment. After the sun had set and there was thick darkness, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch appeared, which passed between these animal parts. That day Yahweh made a covenant with Abram. I have given this land to your descendants, from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates River, the territory of the Keni, the Kenizi, the Kadmoni, the Ittiti, the Perizi, the Rephaim, the Amory, the Kenani, the Girgashi, and the Yabusi. Last chapter. Chapter 16. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not borne him a child. but she had an Egyptian slave girl named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, Here now Yahweh has kept me. Here now Yahweh has kept me from having children. So go in and sleep with my slave girl. Maybe I'll be able to have children through her. Abram listened to what Sarai said. It was after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan that Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her slave girl, and gave her to Abram, her husband, to be his wife. Abram had sexual relations with Hagar, and she conceived. But when she became aware that she was pregnant, she looked on her mistress with contempt. Sarai said to Abram, This outrage being done to me is your fault. True, I gave my slave girl to you to sleep with, but when she saw that she was pregnant, she began holding me in contempt. May Yahweh decide who is right, I or you. However, Abram answered Sarai, Look, she's your slave girl. Deal with her as you think fit. Then Sarai treated her so harshly that she ran away from her. The angel of Yahweh found her by a spring in the desert, the spring on the road to Shur, and said, Hagar, Sarai's slave girl, where have you come from, and where are you going? She answered, I'm running away from my mistress Sarai. The angel of Yahweh said to her, Go back to your mistress and submit to her authority. The angel of Yahweh said to her, I will greatly increase your descendants. There will be so many that it will be impossible to count them. The angel of Yahweh said to her, Look, you are pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You are to call him Ishmael, because Yahweh has paid attention to your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man, and with his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, living his life at odds with all his kinsmen. So she named Yahweh, who has spoken with her, El Roi, God of seeing, because she said, Have I really seen the one who sees me? This is why the well has been called Bel Lakai Roi, well of the one who lives and sees. It lies between Kadesh and Bered. Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram called the son whom Hagar had borne Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. Right, one more. Genesis 17. When Abram was 99 years old, Yahweh appeared to Abram and said to him, I am El Shaddai, God Almighty. Walk in my presence and be pure-hearted. I will make my covenant between me and you, and I will increase your numbers greatly. Abram fell on his face, and God continued speaking with him. As for me, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. Your name will no longer be Abram, but your name will be Abraham, because I have made you the father of many nations. I will cause you to be very fruitful. I will make nations of you, kings will descend from you. I am establishing my covenant between me and you, along with your descendants after you, generation after generation, as an everlasting covenant, to be God for you and for your descendants after you. I will give you and your descendants after you the land in which you are now foreigners, or the land of Canaan as a permanent possession, and I will be their God. God said to Abraham, As for you, you are to keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you, generation after generation. Here is my covenant, which you are to keep between me and you, along with your descendants after you. Every male among you is to be circumcised. You are to be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskin. This will be the sign of your, this will be the sign of the covenant between me and you. Generation after generation, every male among you who is 8 days old is to be circumcised, including slaves born within your household and those bought from a foreigner not descended from you. The slave born in your house and the person bought with your money must be circumcised. Thus my covenant will be in your flesh as an everlasting covenant. Any uncircumcised male who will not let himself be circumcised in the flesh of his I don't want to say this again. Getting tired, I think. Okay. Any uncircumcised male who will not let himself be circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that person will be cut off from his people because he has broken my covenant. God said to Abraham, as for Sarai, your wife, you're not to call her Sarai. Her name is to be Sarah. I will bless her. Moreover, I will give you a son by her. Truly, I will bless her. She will be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her. At this, Abraham fell on his face and laughed. He thought to himself, will a child be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah give birth at 90? Abraham said to God, if only Ishmael could live in your presence. God answered, no, but Sarah your wife will bear you a son, and you are to call him Yitzchak. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. But as for Ishmael, I have heard you. I have blessed him. I will make him fruitful and give him many descendants. He will father 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But I will establish my covenant with Yitzchak, whom Sarah will bear to you at this time next year. With that, God finished speaking with Abraham and went up from him. Abraham took Ishmael his son, all the slaves born in his house, and all who had been bought with his money, every male among the people in Abraham's household, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin that very day, just as God had said to him. Abraham was 90 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, and Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. Abraham and Ishmael his son were circumcised on the same day, and all the men in his household, both slaves born in his house and those with money, bought with money from a foreigner, were circumcised with him. Okay, I'm done. Thank you very much. So, okay, so now I'm gonna do ASMR pretty early in the I'll do ASMR in about an hour from now. Thank you very much. Namaste.